I work at NASA. We made alien contact yesterday. I can't tell you who I am, and I can't tell you the name of the program, but what I can tell you is that if what they say is true, we're in trouble. Now, we didn't make contact in the way that you think we would. We didn't beam out an episode of The Office towards Andromeda and hear back from alien crickets, and we definitely didn't meet them face to face. We found another way to communicate. Something apparently ancient humans had figured out as well. There are countless dilapidated ancient structures around the world, and some of them, not all, but some, were communication arrays. At least a handful on each continent. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few after I describe what we did. We've been working on this technology for a while, and there's a long-standing theory that sound has a much larger part in the universe than just being random vibrations. That the universe is simply a bunch of vibrations and sound, and if you find a way to manipulate those vibrations properly, you can do things that seem impossible. We proved that yesterday. By creating an extremely precise echo chamber and playing certain frequencies into it at precisely the right volumes and the exact right timings, we broke some sort of barrier. Nothing really happened, visually at least. We had run countless tests like these with tiny minute differences, and this one seemed pretty mundane. There was a slight, unnatural thrumming. The glass between us and the echo chamber shook in regular intervals, as if we were playing a bass-heavy song too loudly. The first thing that tipped us off that something was happening was that once we turned the speakers off, the thrumming didn't stop. My 3 coworkers and I could feel this thrumming in our chests still, kind of like being next to a very loud drum. We talked for a moment before we all fell silent. There was something else now. It wasn't a voice. It was some sort of intelligent vibration. I can't explain it. It was like a voice was inside my chest, but it wasn't speaking. I could just feel what it was saying. My coworkers and I debated on the exact wording afterwards, but we all agreed on the overall messages each time. Like I said, they weren't really talking, so I'll do my best to phrase it in ways that get across what they said, and the way that they said it. Whoa, you guys are back? Is what I felt in my chest. My colleagues and I stared at each other in utter confusion. One of them spoke up. "Hello?" he asked hesitantly. There was a silence for a moment, before the thrumming spoke back. "I think I have it set right now. Say that again?" "Hello?" I repeated back to it in place of the other scientists. "Yep, there it is," he said quickly. "You guys figured it out again. That's crazy," it exclaimed. This wasn't what I was thinking the first human and alien conversation was going to go like. I wasn't even sure that this was the first contact at this point, though. "Who is this? What is this?" I asked loudly into the open air of our control room. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to give you details like who we are, but what this is the ultimate form of communication in our universe. Your ancestors figured it out briefly too. With some quick deduction on how it was wording things, I think each of us figured out what we were talking to was alien in origin around the same time. "Where are you from?" I asked. "You have to be close." Hell, with the way we're talking back and forth, they had to be really close. It takes communication to Mars a few minutes to get there, just because that's as fast as light travels. If we were talking this quickly back and forth, they basically had to be on Earth. "I guess you wanted to know. We didn't tell your ancestors. We didn't think they'd get it. Let me do some math real quick." It wasn't about a minute before it spoke again. "What you see is your observable universe. That's not the whole universe. It's not even close. Multiply that by about 15, and that's about how far we are away. And there's a lot past that." We all looked at each other. It was speaking utter bullshit to us now. That was impossible. We'd never be able to communicate. Ever. It's physically impossible. We explained that to the chest voice, and we were met by an equal level of confusion. "Why are you still using light as a yardstick?" it asked incredulously. Suddenly, his voice grew slightly dire. "You're still not advanced enough to know. You don't even know, do you?" "Know what?" one of my friends asked. "You are dead center in the life abyss. There is no life on any planet around you for more than 10 of your observable universes around you in any direction. It's a universal mystery on how you're even alive," it spoke grimly. Never in my life had I felt smaller, more insignificant, and more alone. It continued, and there's a reason for that. An earnest, intangible feeling of dread took over the control room. There's a reason for that. It reverberated through my entire body as the vibrations spoke. But then, silence. No one in the control room spoke a word. We barely even looked at each other. The silence continued for over a minute, and it felt like a day. "What's the reason?" Dave, the senior scientist on hand, finally spoke. He had chosen a serious and somber tone, and an endless list of choices on how to react. "If you value your lives, if you value the lives of everything on your planet, never use this form of communication ever again." It shook into our chests. That one felt less welcoming. It felt like a dire warning, and just like that, we felt the tingling, shaking force leave our chests. It just simply faded away, like how a note on a guitar is plucked. We looked now on one another. What was the play? Do we forge on bravely into the void in the name of science and play the frequencies again? Or do we take an alien warning and stop? We didn't get to make that decision. Our program is monitored closely by the US military. A voice I didn't recognize came through over the intercom. "Don't touch anything, folks. We're gonna come in and take a look at a few things." Dave took charge. We were all clearly panicked at what we had experienced, but he seemed to have the most level head. "All we can do is tell the truth," he reasoned, just as the door to the control room was opened. The next hour or so was a blur. I was first questioned by my boss as to what he just watched over his monitor. What he saw was a handful of his employees standing in a circle and periodically yelling nonsense at no one in particular. I took Dave's advice to heart and told him as clearly as I could what happened. I think I was the first one he talked to, and he wasn't buying anything I said. Slowly, I was joined by the rest of the team, one by one, and they recounted pretty much exactly what I had said. So now, what they knew was that we had all started a test, then stood around in a circle, and then we all came up with the same story. And it started to get more believable. We were each rushed into individual physical exams, and then into a more in-depth interview with someone from the military. The exams seemed to go well. I never heard back from them. The interview seemed to be going good as well. I'd basically recounted what I'd said to my boss, word for word. Just this time, on tape, and in front of some guy in an army uniform. Just when things seemed to be wrapping up, the door to our small interviewing office opened behind me. "Sir, we need you down the hall immediately," a woman in army fatigues spoke quickly, before rushing back down the hallway. I looked back at the man interviewing me, but he was already halfway out the door before I could say anything. I was sitting there for a few moments, and I had time to think. Was I crazy if I believed whatever the thing on my chest was telling me? Everything it said sounded impossible, but nothing of it felt like it liked it. Even though I could only feel what it was saying, I could feel its excitement when we first made contact. I could feel the desperation in it as it told us to never contact it again. What was important though, is that nothing felt like a lie. I noticed that my interviewer had been taking notes as we spoke. Now that I had been left alone for a few minutes, I thought, what was the harm in taking a peek? I slowly reached over the table and flipped his papers over. They read, Unknown Frequency Report. Subject, my name. Significant physical changes to the subject since his last physical 6 months ago, according to the base physician after exposure to the frequencies in this report. No cosmetic changes or complaints of pain or unease. Describes vibration in chest. Describes hearing voices after being exposed into the frequencies. No history of mental illness. Frequencies that cause mental illness? Breaks with reality? Hallucinations? That's as far as he got before he was interrupted. I slid the papers back across the table and sat back in my chair. All of us had described the same thing, but they were thinking we were all just crazy. It warned us, and the more I thought about it, I wanted to take the warning to heart. I sat up starkly. She said down the hall. The control room was down the hall. With how they rushed us out of there, we didn't even have a chance to turn the machinery off. And in a stunned state, we didn't even turn a single dial. All they had to do was press a button and the vibrations would play again. Shit. I exploded out of my seat, through the door and down the hall. I ripped the door to the control room open, to all my military officers and a few more scientists standing there in disbelief. I hadn't even heard the vibrations again, but I could hear the voice on the other side. And now, so could they. I just told you to never use this again. It thundered in my chest. A few of the older men in the room grabbed at the chests in pain. One sec, I need to check something. It spoke again angrily. You could have gotten away with it using it just once. Twice was too much. His sentence ended in a twinge of fear. He heard you. He's listening right now. And he's coming.